Seeing a threat to its monopoly system on the horizon, the global pharma industry had already mobilized Western governments, led by the United States, to use the World Trade Organization, or WTO, as a vehicle to force developing countries into adopting strict Western-style patents on medicine. The protocol they used to do this is known as the TRIPS Agreement.
The international trade agreement that was called TRIPS, Trade-Related Intellectual Property. It was an agreement that was for the interest of the advanced industrial countries, for the pharmaceutical industry, but did not reflect the interests of those in the developing countries.
TRIPS effectively took control of drug patents out of the hands of national governments in the developing world and put it into those of the Western-controlled World Trade Organization, which has draconian powers to punish countries it views as stepping out of line. This was widely seen as a direct attack on third world generics by the powerful global drug industry.
The drug companies wanted to prevent South Africa from making medicines affordable because it had a domino effect in mind. South Africa goes, India goes, Brazil goes, Thailand goes, Argentina goes, and so on. And then, of course, what about the United States, which is their biggest market, the biggest market of them all, because United States consumers have exactly the same sort of brains that we have in the end.
When the trade negotiators signed the agreement to make access to medicine more difficult, they were signing the death warrants for thousands of people in the developing countries. That's not what they were focusing. They were celebrating. But in fact, that was what they were doing.
And they knocked out what was the dream of the world, was the Indian system.
The drug companies might have lost a battle over AIDS drugs, but with TRIPS, they won the war. Facing the full force of the WTO, India and other key developing countries lost the legal ability to make low-cost generic versions of newer drugs. And the consequences for billions of people living in the global south are potentially catastrophic.
So for the next generation of drugs, needed drugs, which people desperately need to stay alive, they're not going to be there except at the high prices.
What is likely to happen? People are going to die. To me, that is genocide.
India has gone into the system of patenting in health, which I don't think is a good system. But they had no alternative to accepting.
In the area of pharmaceuticals, and particularly in the area of life-saving drugs, if you can't get the right to that drug, your citizens die. And forcing a country to sign a law that says, okay, we'll let our citizens die so you can keep your patent monopolies and your prices up, seems to be immoral.
When we had under $1 a day, it was symbolic. We are now at 1/3 of it. The question is, will these future drugs remain cheap?
Since the early 1970s, India has supplied low-cost medicine to the developing world. But this lifeline to billions of the world's poorest people is being severed as the TRIPS patent provisions take hold, with no alternative source of affordable medicine anywhere in sight.
They have us as their hostages. If we face an emergency here in Africa, we shall die because the laws don't protect us.
Lack of access to medicine increasingly affects people in Western countries as well. Almost half of all Americans now say that they are unable to afford their prescription drugs, a number which grows with each passing year.
In the US, to stay healthy and well and not die is not a basic human right. And that's why we have the system we do have here.
The companies can't continue to take the position, they're just Africans, let them die. And it's going to be even harder for them to take the position, they're just old Americans, let them die.
There isn't a single state who could continue providing health care at the levels and cost that exists because of drug company and health technology company profiteering. So the problem's not going to go away. Whether it's General Motors running bankrupt because they can't afford their health care bill, or whether it's people who need the medicine, who will form a most unusual alliance to either force change or to end the system as we know it.
It is often argued that the global drug companies fought low-cost AIDS medication in poor countries because they feared it might force down prices for their own products in the West. But this fear proved totally unjustified. Even as ARV prices in Africa and the global South were continuously falling, prices in the United States remained virtually unchanged.
The drug industry has acted based on the financial incentives that they have, that we have set up in the Western world. I mean, we're all responsible for this in a way. We need to do some things here to make sure we're not just killing off millions of people because of a lack of access to drugs.
At the beginning of the millennium, perhaps 8,000 people with HIV in Africa had access to life-saving drugs. Just over a decade later, the number on treatment in developing countries would pass 8 million, virtually all of them taking generic ARVs from India. In the years after antiretroviral therapy was proven effective, however, it is estimated that 10 million or more people in the global South died of AIDS because Western drug companies and governments denied them access to affordable and available medication.
It's devastated countries. It's become a major foreign policy problem. It's become a military problem. And the medicines are there and they are affordable. Of course, it's under $100 a year now. So there we are. I'll tell you the truth, I have dreams about kind of for a minute.
All those people who had power to stop it, including drug company executives, are responsible for all those deaths of lives that could have been saved between 1996 and 2003. And the rich world didn't care until poor people mobilized.
You fight our patent monopolies, we will make sure you die. I mean, that was their attitude.
We have discovered so many things in the world, and we cannot fail to discover a formula where business can continue and prosper, and poor people don't have to pay the price with their lives.
As long as there are monopolies on medicine, millions of people will continue to die needlessly every year, with life-saving drugs priced out of their reach. Most of those saved by generic ARVs will eventually need newer second and third line drugs to survive. But with TRIPS and ever harsher patent measures ensuring that few of these can be made in generic form, millions now living healthy and productive lives will again face death for lack of available medicine.
When it became a life or death question, it's obvious that the whole TRIPS system is going to have to be amended so that we don't have these fights that cause people to die. We can never let this happen again.
People have to figure out that they don't have to accept a pessimistic, crappy future. They can change things. You can change things, I can change things, we can change things.
We have made the mightiest industry in the world shake in its boots.
Clearly, once you have a system that appeared to work first, but then all of a sudden excludes millions of people in the US, maybe billions of people around the whole globe, you should sit back and ask yourself, well, does this really make sense? Or do we have to change something and tweak something here? And then you get into the trouble is, why would anybody who is benefiting from this system want to change or tweak it? None of the people who make money off of it, none of the people who drive power off of it want to change it. But again, if you have enough pressure, if things get bad enough, people do change. I guess this film is part of that.